The notion of the Republican Party is synonymous with Christian values has been a dominant narrative in American politics for decades. But this association is largely based on selective, often misleading interpretations of Christianity. A deeper examination of Republican policies and rhetoric reveals that while the party presents itself as the defender of Christian principles, its actions often contradict core tenets of the faith, particularly in terms of caring for the vulnerable, addressing systemic injustices, and promoting compassion for all people. Furthermore, America is a democracy, not a theocracy, and the blending of religion and politics, especially when it is selective and hypocritical, can lead to harmful policies and exclusions that fail to reflect the pluralistic values of the nation. It is a selective brand of morality. One of the key ways Republicans have claimed moral authority is by focusing on a narrow set of issues, a narrow set of self serving issues, such as opposition to abortion and LGBTQ rights. These issues, while important to many Christians, represent only a small fraction of the teachings of Jesus Christ and the broader Christian tradition. The party's pro life stance, for example, centers almost exclusively on protecting the unborn while ignoring or opposing policies that support children and families after birth. The very same politicians who argue for saving the unborn after oftentimes vote against funding for healthcare, education, and the most basic needs of a child, food assistance programs that are directly benefiting children and impoverished families. This selective moral framework is not reflective of the broader message of Christianity. Yet many Christians fall for it, including black church leaders, which emphasizes care for the poor, the sick, and the marginalized. The Bible repeatedly calls for compassion towards the least of these, Matthew 25, verse 40, a group that includes those in poverty, the sick, and the stranger. Yet Republican policies often prioritize tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation, and shrinking social safety nets over addressing systemic inequalities. The recent push to curtail access to healthcare, including rejecting Medicaid expansion in several states, and we can't overemphasize rejecting help for children. It stands in direct opposition to the Christian call to heal the sick and care for the needy. The false promise of a theocratic agenda. America is not and was never intended to be a theocracy. The founding fathers explicitly enshrined in the Constitution the separation of church and state to prevent the government from imposing religious doctrine on its citizens. This fundamental principle ensures that people of all faiths, as well as those of no faith, can coexist under the same democratic system. However, many Republican politicians and their allies in the religious right have worked to undermine this separation, presenting the United States as a Christian nation where policies should be guided by their interpretation of biblical teachings. This conflation of Christianity with republicanism is dangerous for several reasons. First, it assumes a uniformity of belief among Christians that does not exist. Christianity is a diverse tradition with a wide range of theological perspectives, from progressive to conservative. By presenting their version of Christianity as the only valid one, Republicans alienate millions of Christians who interpret their faith differently. Furthermore, it marginalizes non-Christian citizens who make up a growing percentage of the American population, and it undermines the principles of religious freedom. But maybe that's the idea, right? Maybe that's what they really want. The attempt to create a political agenda based on selective religious values. It also risks turning Christianity into a tool for power rather than a faith rooted in humility, service, and love. By aligning itself so closely with political power, especially through figures like Donald Trump, the Republican Party has compromised its moral authority. Trump, a figure who often embodies greed, dishonesty, and cruelty, traits antithetical to Christian values, has been embraced by many on the religious right because he advances their political goals. That's it. He advances their political goals, yet many fall for it, including some I spoke to just today. It reveals the extent to which power, rather than faith, is driving this relationship. The hypocrisy of pro-life and post-birth neglect, perhaps the greatest contradiction in the Republican portrayal of itself as the party of Christian values. It lies in its treatment of children after they are born. While Republican leaders champion pro-life policies, their commitment to supporting life ends abruptly at birth. Once the baby is born, they don't want to have nothing to do with it. Children living in poverty, children born into families without access to health care, or children separated from their parents at the border often find little support, if any, from the Republican Party. The United States has one of the highest child poverty rates among wealthy nations. Yet, Republican policies frequently undermine efforts to address this crisis. The party has consistently opposed expanding child credits, universal pre-K, and affordable child care. All measures that do dramatically improve the lives of millions of children in America. In healthcare, many Republicans have fought to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And you have to ask yourself why. The Affordable Care, which expanded access to health insurance for millions of low-income families, including children. Why would a party that care about family and children do something like this? The hypocrisy is perhaps most visible in the Republican approach to immigration. Children who are brought to the U.S. by their parents fleeing violence or seeking a better life have been detained in inhumane conditions, separated from their families, and treated as criminals under Republican-led policies. This callousness towards immigrant children starkly contrasts with the Christian ethos of welcoming the stranger and caring for those in need. Christian values in a democratic society. That's what we need. If we measure Christian values by the standards of Jesus' teachings, compassion, care for the poor, and love for one's neighbor, Republican policies often fall short. The party's focus on religious identity as a tool for political gain runs counter to the true spirit of Christianity, which is about serving others, not seeking power. In a pluralistic democratic society like the United States, the government's role is to create policies that promote the common good for all people, not just those who share the religious beliefs of the ruling party. It is important to remember that Christianity itself is not a monolith. Many Christians advocate for progressive policies that align more closely with the teachings of Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Christ, such as universal health care, criminal justice reform, and climate action. These issues reflect a broader and more inclusive vision of what it means to be pro-life, one that values the dignity of all people at all stages of life. The narrative that Republicans are the party of Christian values is a misleading one. It's built on a selective interpretation of religious teachings that ignores much of the broader Christian tradition. America was never and is not a theocracy, and efforts to conflate religion with political power undermine both democracy and the faith they claim to represent. If we are to have a moral, compassionate society, it must be one that cares for the vulnerable, supports children after they're born, and respects the diversity of belief that make up the American fabric, values that are often neglected by the Republican agenda. I was so shocked today speaking to two young men who are one who is a minister of religion and another who a great friend, one who's serving in the military, black men, and was so shocked to hear these men talk about their affinity for the Republican Party and voting for Trump on the sole issue of the misrepresentation of as the Republican Party as a party of 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 Christianity. They're winning on this issue because we fail to address it. And neither of nobody in the Democratic Party is really talking about it in a way that resonates with people to not to malign the people who are misguided, but to educate. Have a good night.